This is Beyond the Green Screen, an Arizona's Family Originals podcast.
Hi, everyone. I'm Meteorologist Royal Norman. This is Beyond the Green Screen, the First Alert podcast about all things weather and beyond. And my guest today is Erinanne Saffell. She's the State Climatologist for Arizona, which is really a cool job. But she's also a person who has been living here in the Valley of the Sun forever. How are you, Erinanne?
Oh, yeah, we can say forever. Yes, nice to meet you. Nice to see you all again.
I didn't mean like forever, but you said you were telling me you grew up out in Mesa, didn't you?
Well, I kind of ended up in Mesa.
Okay.
I started in Scottsdale.
Oh, okay.
So that's really kind of where it all started. If we want to go back, let's go to 1970.
Please.
If we want to go back that far, which we're
Please.
going to have to because that's the best story ever.
Go for it.
So my family lived near Hayden Road and Indian School. And so 1970, think about what was going on in 1970 in Scottsdale. That was before the flood control device, along the green belt, the Indian Bend Wash.
Yeah.
So there was no flood control device there. And I was a very small child, very young. My first memory is my family putting sandbags around our house because of a flooding event. I remember us walking in the water in the street. That's my first memory. And so then, of course, I was fascinated with water growing up, and here in Arizona, too much or not enough. And so I wanted to understand what was going on with that. So I wanted to study meteorology. I wanted to study hydrology. So I ended up at ASU. And that's where it all started. So now as a climatologist, I really wanted to go back and understand what happened in 1970, if I was just making it up or what. So that was the next thing that I had to do.
So did you figure that out? Did you figure out what happened in 1970?
1970 was fascinating. So we're looking at the Labor Day storm of 1970. So September 4th, 5th, and 6th. It was the deadliest storm in Arizona. It was the wettest storm in Arizona. Over in the Workman's Creek area, kind of Tonto Basin area, they had 12 inches of rain in one day. Now, consider what we get in Arizona. Our annual precipitation for the state is 12 inches. And so that set that record. And unfortunately, it was a deadly event along the Labor Day area. Here's what's fascinating, though, is you go back, and because I had to go back, I had to reread all of the reports and everything just to make sure I wasn't losing my mind, that it really happened. And they actually had satellite imagery from that event in 1970. So it was the improved TIROS. And they would take an image, I think it was at 3 p.m. every day over Arizona, and they would fax the information in. So that's an amazing thing.
Yeah, the old die fax. That takes me way back, huh? That's way back. So that's kind of cool. You were in a flood, and then years later you figured out what the flood was, one of the worst in Arizona history. And that Workman Creek rainfall, I think that still stands today.
It still stands today. It absolutely does. And, fortunately, we've got a really strong flood control device in our counties now. And, we're keeping people safe. And that's what's really important.
Yeah, we can talk about flood control in just a bit because I just love what they're doing for sure. So, but Erinanne, let me ask you this. So as you were growing up in the 70s and then into the 80s and going to school, did you watch TV weather at all?
I absolutely did.
Who was your favorite?
So
I wasn't on at the time, folks, ladies and gentlemen.
I know. Yeah. When did you go on? That's what I want to know.
I didn't get there till 84-ish. So yeah. So you were watching what? Say Dewey Hopper?
No, it was. Oh my gosh! I just saw him the other day. He just came to our meeting the other day.
Oh.
Okay, start naming him.
Oh goodness gracious!
You got to name him. This is the test.
Well, see, I didn't see many of them either, too. But you used to watch TV weather. What did you think about TV weather?
So with TV weather, here's the thing: is that was the only avenue really that we had in the 70s and 80s, and even in the 90s. So I don't know if you did you get the 122 degrees?
Oh yeah, I was right there on the tarmac. Boom.
So were you doing reports on that? Is that when
Yeah.
you were
Yeah.
doing that?
Yeah.
So that was how we had it, because we didn't have the internet.
No.
And so you read your newspaper and you saw it on TV.
Yeah.
And I remember that.
Yeah.
It's just kind of a very different experience with that 122 degrees then versus what we experience now. And
Yeah.
fortunately, we're able to get that information out all the time now.
Was your favorite weather person Jerry Foster?
Jerry Foster. I remember Jerry Foster.
Ah, the helicopter pilot. But sometimes he
Yeah.
did weather. Was your favorite
Yeah.
weather person Stu Tracy?
Stu Tracy. No, not
No, it
Stu.
was not Stu. We'll come up with your favorite weather person.
You're going to have to get it.
I'm dangling names of people that I can barely remember myself.
Ed Phillips.
Ed Phillips.
Ed Phillips.
Ed Phillips.
Ed Phillips.
And we've
There it
got
is.
a winner. Ed Phillips. I
I
love
know.
it. Ed, I salute you. Ed Phillips. Can I tell you an Ed Phillips story?
Yes.
Ed used to work at KTAR. He really was the big weather person in town at the time. Worked at Channel 12, but also worked at KTAR. And I don't know which job was his bigger job, but that's where I met him at KTAR, because I was this little board operator, the guy that pressed the buttons and made the spots come on the air and the audio equalize and stuff like that. And then I did a little bit of news reading on the weekend, because I could talk like this on the radio. And then near the end of when I was finishing at ASU, Ed was going on like a 3-week, I don't know, excursion or something, with one of these trips where in those days, go on a cruise with the weatherman, right? Because why wouldn't you want to? And so he had this big cruise thing, and he asked me, and he talked to me, he says, hey, would you mind doing the weather on the radio when I'm gone? He says, I think it would be kind of cool for you to do that. And I was like, oh my God, Ed Phillips is asking me to do the weather on the radio. And I said, so, well, I don't really know how to forecast. I'm still in college and all that. And he says, no, just rip and read. It comes over the weather wire, just rip and read. He says, but have some fun and enjoy. And that is one of my great Ed Phillips stories, because he gave me an opportunity just to do my first weathercast on radio, and I'll never forget that part of Ed. So isn't that a cool thing? We connected with Ed Phillips.
That's a cool thing. But, I think it's important for our community to understand that, we're a small group of people. We kind of all know each other, which is a great thing, because we all help each other out. And I really like that as well.
Yeah, well, and you're absolutely right. Like for me, the people that help me out the most, I would say, besides whom I work with here at Channel 3 and Channel 5, are the people at the National Weather Service, because ask them. I call them all the time, because it's in our business, tell me this is not the truth. It's always good to have some other eyes on what's happening.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then for me, and you were mentioning flood control districts, so Maricopa County, that was one of my first jobs.
Oh.
So we all kind of know each other there, and we all helped out. Yeah, there's the water.
Yeah, I love that. And then there's a further sidebar on the flood control is Papa Hens and Dan having their little what would we call them, forecast discussions on Twitter, formerly X, or X formerly Twitter. That's one of the fun reads, folks, if you ever want to read, because they're both very good meteorologists.
Highly entertaining. And Papa Hens does not hold back when he has questions or he thinks there should be something else. There it is.
I love it. So I did read that you got your BS, your MA, and your PhD at ASU. You are truly a Sun Devil. As you were doing this, what did you have in mind as your goal? Was it teaching? Was it research? Was there a point, or was there a point where you suddenly knew this is the area I want to do?
That's a great question, because, you get into it and you're like, I'm going to go study weather. And that's really what it started with. I wanted to understand what was going on around me. And so that was the undergraduate. And I'm like, wow, this is fascinating. This is an amazing thing. Can I learn more? And that's where the master's came in. And I started working with some amazing people and really diving into understanding more detail about what was happening. And then ultimately wanting to share that information. Now, okay, so this is going to be embarrassing.
No.
Perhaps. I have a big family. And so my older sister and I, when we were very, very young, know how sisters can sometimes be, she would actually call me, misinformation, because I
Oh.
like to tell people about things going on,
Oh.
which could be taken one way or the other. I don't know.
Mhm.
But I've always wanted to share information. So that really has been a part of my life. And that's what came out, is that I really wanted to teach, educate, and help people understand what's going on around them. And to this day, that is absolutely what I do.
And I'm not going to ask you any of your favorite professors because that I'm just not going to do that because there's a ton of folks. I'm just telling you, there's a ton of folks at ASU that I love that taught me well, and there's some there that I never got taught by, Bob Balling or Randy Cerveny, but they got there just after I left. But
Yeah.
they've helped me in my career tremendously just because they've always picked up the phone and answered when I said, help, I need help. It's a really great faculty.
Great faculty, great people. Bob and Randy are amazing to have as colleagues, and to be able to have that as something to say is just astounding, and I love it.
Yeah, it is pretty cool. I like those guys an awful lot. All right, tell us what the state climatologist does in Arizona, Erinanne.
We do a lot. I wear a lot of different hats, and I think that's something I enjoy as well. So there's always something to do. There's a lot of research that's done. There are a lot of reports. Holy cow, tons of reports. I invite everyone, if you want to go read some of those reports, you can go to the website. I've got them all there. But really, kind of a lot of different things, in the sense that, some days I may be talking to folks like you, Royal, talking to the media so that we can understand what's going on with the weather and climate in Arizona. I may go talk to second graders. Second graders are the best. I really think they're the best.
Perfect age, yes. Yes, they are. I love them.
I think so. Or we may be going up to Sedona to measure their urban heat island, which we did last
Oh.
summer. So we do all sorts of different kinds of things. But really, what we do in the office is to take all of this information, because, anybody can go look up these numbers. But what do those numbers really mean? That's what we try and bring. What's the context? Is it bigger, smaller? Is it something to pay attention to? Can we ignore it? What's going on? And that's what we try and bring.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I love numbers too, and I don't get to work with them the way you do in more of a long-term research thing. But we do work up a lot of numbers ourselves. And when you then all of a sudden you get this list and you go, that seems, yeah, but wait a minute, what does it mean in the
What does
whole,
it mean?
in the whole scheme of things? And that sometimes that's the hardest part, isn't it?
It is. And, and there's folks making decisions with this information. And so what I can do and try and make sure that it's understood in a way that makes sense to folks, that's really what I try and do.
So we were talking about, we've been talking about for the past 4 or 5 years how hot it's getting around here in the summertime. And I said to you before we started recording here, because we've all been looking at the data, and I just looked yesterday, and I kind of went, like, my mic's going to go. Yeah, with my head on my mic. I kind of just went, there's no way we're not going to have another record hot summer in Phoenix. And you say to that?
Well, that's what I was saying. So folks, how we get asked in, like May, what's it going to be like in the summer?
Right.
And I was starting to talk about July, and my sense was that it's going to be hot in July, but it's not going to be as hot as last July. So I tell you, I've been watching those July numbers like nobody's business, not just in Phoenix, all across the state, what's going on, because it wasn't just hot in Phoenix last July. It was hot all over the Southwest. So if we can kind of look at the first couple of weeks that we had here for this July, it was neck and neck with last summer. It was right there. Boom, boom, boom. We had, breaking numbers again going on in Arizona, across the Southwest. You may recall Vegas hit their 120 degrees for the first time. So I was a little concerned about that. But fortunately, the thing that really saves us, and we know this in the summer, if we get those summer thunderstorms, the monsoon builds in and we get the thunderstorms, that cools us off. And that's really what we missed last July. We didn't get those thunderstorms, so we didn't cool off. Fortunately, we started cooling off the last couple of weeks. And so looking at the numbers, so if you want the numbers, do you want me to tell you the
Yeah,
numbers?
go for it.
All right, the numbers. I mean, we're not fully at the end of July right now,
Right.
but it looks like for most of Arizona, we're not going to beat last July.
Okay, for the whole state, or for most
for most of the state.
Okay.
So if here's the thing though.
Okay,
so
okay.
we're looking at statewide July temperatures. What was the July average temperature?
Right.
That's the big one last year.
Right.
That broke, that Phoenix is the hottest U.S. city with the hottest monthly temperature. So now looking at that, it looks like Phoenix and Tucson and Flagstaff are not going to beat last year.
Okay.
But Yuma and Kingman will, I think, have their hottest July. I think they're going to break it because they haven't had the thunderstorms there.
Wow.
So it's been really dry in Yuma and Kingman.
And of course, it can change because if for some reason we get a monsoon surge in August and it stays pretty wet and keeps the temperatures down, that could change the whole deal because we do have 30 days plus. But so far, it's been pretty dismal.
Well, yeah, there's some places where we're getting some good precipitation. I mean, this is the hit and miss. This is what we do with the monsoon. I think that's why, we pay such close attention to it because it could change on a dime, and we know that.
And I was going to say, you guys do put out great products once a week. I'm gonna let you give websites and everything like that, and also I don't know if the public can be invited, but you do weekly Zoom calls on or monthly Zoom calls on where the climate's going. But the last map they put out a really good map on precipitation, and it basically showed where the drier than normal areas were, and one of those big circles was kind of around us and also up in northern Arizona. And then the wetter ones, and again, I'm just sort of paraphrasing your map, was northwest Arizona, and it seemed like southern Arizona was doing okay. So it's hit and miss and depends on where you live, doesn't it?
Yeah, and then we have to get through August, and then we have to get through September. So we'll see what's going to happen. And fingers are always crossed. I mean, we could always have something happen that we're not able to look in the outlooks. We're not able to forecast yet.
Yeah.
So there could be anything that comes up, and we'll just wait and see.
Well, you know what I love about you? You are the optimist. You are a total optimist, and I think that's fantastic. Now, speaking of flood control and the things that they do and how you coordinate with them, it's so important, it seems to me, and the importance has only grown with, a couple of weeks ago, a week and a half ago, we had the microburst where we had a factory, not a factory, a warehouse knocked down, and we lost a person in that. And then we have flooding that we're always losing people. Is it kind of the thing, the more information, the better for us in being able to prepare for these types of events?
I think it's helpful to understand and be able to use the resources in a certain sense, in that event that was deadly with the microburst, we were able to see that on Doppler radar, and you could tell where you had the most extreme events happening. So you could recreate that situation. I had FEMA give me a call to use that Doppler data. So, there are all sorts of resources, things that happen on the backside of things from these resources. So it's all a good thing. And, I love the Flood Control District of Maricopa County. They have 40 weather stations that we can get real time. And so having that density is so important because, my opinion is that if it doesn't get in the rain gauge, it doesn't really happen. We need as many rain gauges out there as possible to measure. And that's what I'm grateful for.
Well, and you're right about that, because how many times do we show on radar, and you've seen it, where we go, okay, there's a rainfall rate of, 2.5 inches per hour, but it's not going to rain an hour right there. So that doesn't really mean that much, except the rain is coming down very fast. And then there are radar estimated amounts of rain, but those are also estimates, and they haven't fallen into a can and been collected. So you're basically like, if it ain't in the can, I ain't counting it.
It's like it never happened, right? So everyone needs to volunteer, become a CocoRa's volunteer
reporting station.
get that water recorded, get
Yeah.
the rain recorded.
It really is easy to be. All you have to do is, and in, these weather stations are not super expensive. I'm not saying they're cheap, but they're not super expensive like they used to be 10 and 20 years ago. And I've got one in my backyard that I bought 7, 8 years ago. It's still kicking out the information, and they just last and last and last and last. So yeah, it is kind of fun to watch weather in your own backyard.
Yeah, absolutely. I encourage everyone to do that. I mean, that's the fun part of it all, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. So let's talk about the heat a minute. How is there any limit to how hot we can get in Phoenix, Arizona over any kind of time span you want to figure out?
I know.
Yeah, so maybe that's just the question. Do we know that? Is there an
Are we
answer?
going to hit, are we going to hit 130 degrees in Phoenix? Is that the question? I think that's the question that
No.
most people have.
Here's what I'll knock it down a bit and say, are we going to do a 125?
We hit 122.
Yep.
So here's that perspective as a climatologist. If it's happened once before, it's going to happen again. But what we're seeing more often are more hot days, not necessarily getting up to those extreme 125, 130. Sure, that can happen. The physics of that for 125, it's going to take a lot. For the physics of 130, it's really going to take a lot.
Yeah.
But can we have more days of 110 degrees or higher? Yes, that's absolutely what we're seeing happening in the Phoenix area right now. And so that then becomes important to understand what's happening around us. But really, the important thing is that it's the nighttime temperatures
Oh, I know.
that are increasing 2 to 3 times more than what the daytime temperatures are doing.
It's incredible how warm it is staying at night around Metro Phoenix. It's just crazy, if you will. And I'll tell you a thing that we looked up. We took the days, 115 degree days or more, from the start of the Phoenix record, 1895, and we went all the way to 2004, and that was like 110 years, okay? So we had X amount of days, and I can't remember the exact number, but let's just say it was 67 days in that 110 years that had gotten to 115 or more. Then we took the next 20 years, including the one we're working on right now. Guess what? We've had the same amount of 115 days in the last 20 years as we had in the first 110 years of weather records in Phoenix. So you're
telling me you're a climatologist is what you're telling me.
I love it. I really do love that stuff because it tells you that we are getting a lot more of those hotter days than we ever. We had years where we didn't get a 115 back in the day. And now if we don't get a 115, we're looking around and going, man, the temperature gauge must be off, right?
Yeah. So I looked at the 110. So this is kind of my perspective on how I tried to see what we were doing with that. So go back to the early 1900s, looking at the Phoenix weather station, and how many times a year did we get 110 degrees or higher? On average, we had about 5 days every year of 110 degrees or higher. So that's the early 1900s.
Right.
So what's happening now is that we're about 5 or 6 times more than that. So those kinds of things, like, we have about 27 days on average, but then you go and you look at, well, what did we hit in 2020? We had 53 days.
Yeah.
What did we have last year? We had 55 days. And so then you go back to, if it's happened before, it can happen again. So that's what we're seeing, is that bigger increase, that trend.
That is very interesting. And the other thing, I didn't follow up at the time when you said it, but I just love the idea that you are the state climatologist and you follow state stuff. And even though there might be different variances of warming or warming basically at different places around the state, we're seeing the same signals essentially, aren't we, in terms of how we're continuing to heat things up? Maybe not quite as much in Flagstaff as here, but the entire state is seeing those signals, aren't they?
Yeah, you look for the trends, like who's getting the hottest temperature that they've ever experienced, right? So you don't look at the numbers necessarily, like, is everybody getting 120 degrees? Not necessarily, but everybody increasing, and by how much? What's the rate? So you look at those kinds of things to kind of understand what the trends are telling you. And unfortunately, these past couple of Julys have been really, really hot. But again, it's not just the state of Arizona. It's the Southwest has been experiencing that. And if you remember the first couple of weeks of July, all the way up into Washington State, they were breaking records. So it's been a really, really hot time.
It's been a crazy time, that's for sure. Okay, we're kind of starting to wrap up our time, but I'm not going to let you go without talking about the monsoon as we finish up August and I guess through September 15th. September 5th? No, we go all the way through September.
We go all the way through September.
All the way through September. So, are we going to, here's your chance to forecast and prognosticate. I got to do a little climatation. Now you get to prognosticate along with us. Are we going to get some rain, some decent rain in August and September?
So, what I'm going to say is that the Phoenix Weather Station last July, for the whole monsoon, only had 0.15 of an inch, 0.15 inches last July.
I know.
We've beat that. We've already beat that. So I'm just going to leave it there and be happy with that.
All right, there you go. I love that. The glass is always half full, that's for sure. All right, so and she's dead right. We're like doubled last year already, so boom, everything else is just like money in the bank, isn't it?
Gravy.
I love gravy. I love that. All right, Erinanne, I've loved talking to you. I'm just, from now on, do you mind? I'll just call you, when I call you and email you, I'm just going to call, hey, misinformation, can you help me out with this?
There it is.
There he is.
There it is.
Erinanne Saffell is the state climatologist here in Arizona. Just a really great person, fun to talk to, has a ton of information. Oh, so tell folks about how they can access some of your climate products, where they are on websites, and that kind of thing before we go.
Happy to. So go to my website, azclimate.asu.edu. And what you'll see, you'll find that there's a lot of information there. Some of it's educational, some of it's current information, but really what you're getting are all of the links that I use to find things out. So you can be your own mini climatologist and you've got the access right there.
Yeah, even a guy like me can be my own mini climatologist. And Erin keeps track of the legacy dew point monsoon start. So bless your heart, Erin.
It is. Well, you know, it's another record. And as a climatologist, we keep a lot of different records.
Yeah,
so
might as well keep
going
it.
Away.
Thanks for spending some time with us today, Erinanne.
I appreciate your time. Thanks for all you do.
Yep, see ya.
Bye.
Bye.
This is Beyond the Green Screen, an Arizona's Family Originals podcast.